Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to be showing off a vintage Seiko chronograph watch. This is a watch that I got from Japan, and you can see that it has the iconic Panda dial. So a little bit of background, Panda dials are when the subdials are black and then the background is white. Kind of looks like a panda's eyes. And you can also have a reverse Panda where the subdials are white and the background is black. So that was the main reason why I got this watch. I've never owned a Panda dial before, and I think that they look really nice. The more famous Panda chronograph for Seiko's lineup is the 6138-8020. That one only has two subdials, but you can see that this one has three. And that third subdial is an alarm feature, which I'll show later. This watch in particular was made in 1995, so this is about almost 30 years old. I think it's 28 years old. So it's a little bit older, but it's actually working. The alarm function works, the chronograph works, and of course the time is working, which is always good to hear. So let's talk a little bit about that design. So again, I really like Panda dials. I think it really shows good contrast. It's very legible. And we can see here the Seiko is applied, the chronograph is printed, but we do have applied indices. We do have some loom at each of the hour markers, as well as on the chronograph seconds, as well as the hands. It's also loom, and I'll show you later that the loom still actually works. And so yeah, I really like this design. I think that the Panda dial is quite iconic. And I think chronographs always look, or they often look very good. A lot of chronographs, or should I say some chronographs, can look quite busy and crowded, and sometimes it's actually hard to read the time. But I feel like this has a good level of complexity with the subdials, but they still allow enough open space so that you can still read it pretty well. And in terms of the specs, like I said before, this is a quartz watch, which does lower its value because, again, the 6138-8020, that's the more popular and more iconic Seiko chronograph. That one is a automatic watch. So automatic watches typically sell more. This one here you can find for about 150 to 200 Canadian dollars, which is roughly like 100 to 150 US dollars. So it's a little bit cheaper, but it still looks very nice. The case of this watch, as well as the bracelet, is made out of stainless steel. So it does feel not too bad. I would say that the finishing on the case is a little bit on the industrial side of things. So, this is definitely not Grand Seiko quality. And probably back in the day, this was not Seiko's most expensive watch, and you can definitely feel it. It feels not too bad. Like the quality of the stainless steel is okay, but the finishing just isn't the best. And I will say that the bracelet here, it is rolled links, you can see. So that means that it does rattle quite a bit, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I think for vintage watches, you could definitely do better. So yeah, the bracelet isn't the best. It's also harder to adjust these types of bracelets. You do have the adjustments here, but that's about it. So you got those 6 holes and that's about it. So not the best in terms of adjustments, but that's what you get when you buy a vintage watch. At least it came with the bracelet, and the bracelet's in relatively good condition. In terms of the dimensions, it's actually a pretty good size. I think it's a perfect size for a chronograph. We'll get out the calipers here. The case size is about, I'd say, around 39 millimeters. And then the lug to lug, I measured this before, I believe it's about 44 millimeters. Yeah, you can see it's about 44 millimeters lug to lug. So this does fit my 6-inch wrist, which I'll show later. So it does work for small wrists, but I believe with the size of the dial, it looks bigger, so this can work for large wristed people as well. The height, I'm gonna guess, is about 10. It's about 9 millimeters. No, let's adjust that. Yeah, I say about 9 millimeters. Quartz watches are typically thinner than their automatic or mechanical counterparts. And the lug width, if I can get this here, actually looks like this one may be a 19 millimeter lug width. So that's not ideal. Usually you want lugs to be 18 or 20 millimeters for men's watches. 19 millimeters is a bit odd, but that's okay. Overall, the size is pretty good. Again, for vintage watches, they're typically not as big, and I think that actually works to its advantage. I think it's a really nice, compact, but not super small chronograph watch. Next up, let's talk about the different features. So we do have the date window at the 3 o'clock position. That's pretty standard. It is nice that it is a black date window, which matches the subdials. Really, the main features here are going to be with the subdials. So you can see right here at 9 o'clock, that is the seconds hand, and it's ticking away here. Then we have the timer up to 30 minutes. And how that works is we have all these different pushers here. And to be honest, it was a little bit intimidating at first. There was just so many different buttons, and it took me a few minutes to finally figure it out. But the button here, this one starts the chronograph timer. So you can see that long seconds hand, that's the chronograph timer, and it's gonna start ticking. And then we'll push it again to stop it. And again, we can push it to start it again. This button here, this one resets the chronograph. So if I press it here, it'll reset. You can notice that it doesn't reset perfectly to 12 o'clock, but that's pretty normal with quartz chronographs. My moon swatch, the Omega moon swatch, it also doesn't reset perfectly to 12. And actually when I was testing this yesterday, that second hand was closer to the 59-minute marker. So it really depends on the day, and it depends on when you reset it, but you'll always get close enough to the 12 o'clock. This bezel here, this tachymeter, this is seen in a lot of different chronographs, including the Omega Speedmaster. And how it works is actually pretty simple. If I start the chronograph, let's say I'm timing like how long it takes for you to drink a glass of water, and let's say it takes you 7 seconds, then I can do a quick calculation using this. If you can drink 1 glass in 7 seconds, then you can drink 500 glasses in 1 hour. So it turns on, it basically just converts something to amount of things per hour. So that's how the tachymeter works. So go ahead and reset that. The second part, oh, and this thing, this is just the crown to adjust the time and the day. These two pushers here, this is where it gets interesting because there is an alarm feature, which I think is pretty cool to have. This is the first time I've had a watch that actually had an alarm feature. And how it works is that this one will adjust the alarm. So if I pull this out to the first position, you'll hear a beep. And this is the last time I set the alarm. I set the alarm to, what does it look like? 10 o'clock. But let's say I want to set the alarm so that it'll ring at 10:16. So I'll just push this. You can see it goes up. I could also press and hold it if I want the hands to go faster. And what should happen is that if I hit 15 or 16, it'll start to beep because that's the current time. So I just change it to 16. So once that second hand goes to the 16, you'll see it start to beep, just like an alarm. And keep in mind, it's armed because I pulled the crown out to the first position. So we'll just wait and see until that alarm goes off. The alarm also works as a secondary timer, like a second time zone. If I pull this crown to the second position, then I can set this to any time I'd like. So maybe I could set this to the Japan time because I'm always watching out when the Japanese auctions will end, which usually ends, I think they're about 15 hours ahead. So I could set this to, let's say, this would be like 1 p.m. I think it's 1 p.m. or 1 a.m. And you can see that's the alarm. So it'll ring for 20 seconds if I don't do anything. And it's fairly loud. It's kind of cool. It's not like a fully mechanical alarm, but it's different from a smartwatch alarm. And you can push any button to stop it. If I bring this to the second position, that turns off the alarm. And now I can set this to any independent time that I'd like. So again, let's set this to 3:15 maybe, and I'll push it back in. So now you have 2 different time zones, and it'll remember the last alarm I did. So if I pull it out, turn that off, and oh, okay, I guess it didn't. I guess it didn't remember the last alarm, but of course I can always change it. I can just press and hold it, and that will change the alarm time. And as long as this crown is pulled out to the first position, the alarm has been armed. Or I can push it back in, and you can see it goes back to the second time zone that I set for the watch. Also, as I mentioned before, there is a little bit of lume, and thankfully, because these aren't tritium or radium, the lume actually still works somewhat decently. So if I charge it up with some light, you can see that there is a bit of lume showing for the hour hands or the hour markers, as well as the hands and the seconds hand for the chronograph. So it is nice that the glow in the dark feature still works. And finally, here is a wrist shot on my 6-inch wrist. You can see that the 44mm lug to lug really helps with my small wrist. But again, I feel like this can work for people with 7 inches or above in terms of your wrist size. And I think this is a great choice. This is, of course, a vintage watch, so you can't buy it in a store, but you could buy it from the secondhand market, like auction sites or on watch forums. And it's a great way to get a Panda dial for less than $200, I'd say. Again, you can find this for about $150. If you wanted, I think Seiko re-released a chronograph, quartz chronograph with a Panda dial, I think it was about $1,000 Canadian. And same with Hamilton. Hamilton also has a Panda watch, and I think it's about $1,000 as well, maybe a little bit less or a bit more. So if you want a Panda dial, you can definitely look at the Seiko Chronograph vintage lineup. Again, this watch is from 1995, so if you look for watches from around the 1990s, you'll find watches that the dial's in pretty good condition. The crystal is overall in good condition. There's a small scratch over there, but overall it's a pretty good shape. The case, again, no huge issues. The alarm function still works. You can still adjust the time. And of course it's quartz. Well, it does mean that this thing will last for a very long time. Again, when I got this watch, the battery was dead, but once you just swap the battery, it pretty much springs back to life. No service or maintenance needed other than the battery swap. So it's a great choice for that chronograph, under $200. And of course you do get the Seiko branding. So you know that this watch has some history and it's relatively reliable. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my review or my little feature of the Seiko Chronograph watch. Be sure to subscribe for more videos. And as always, I will see you guys next time.